Hello, welcome to the channel, Miracles of History. Don't forget to leave your like and support this work. We have all heard about the Supreme Federal Court, whether in Brazil, in the United States, or in other countries around the world. It appears constantly in the news, in political debates, and in the most important decisions that end up impacting the lives of millions of people. Yet a deep and intriguing question arises. What would a biblical Supreme Federal Court look like? Or, put another way, what is the difference between the structure of justice as we know it today, created and maintained by human laws, and the justice model that the Bible itself describes as coming directly from God? To begin this reflection, let us compare the Brazilian Supreme Federal Court (STF) with what we could call a biblical Supreme Court. In Brazil, the STF is the very last instance of judgment. This means that once the court issues a ruling, there is no further appeal to any other tribunal. The reason behind its name is clear. It is supreme because it stands above every other institution of justice. The Brazilian STF is composed of 11 judges, traditionally called ministers. It is important to clarify here. They are not ministers in the same sense as in the executive branch, like the Minister of Education or the Minister of the Economy, but rather judges who carry this honorary title by legal tradition. And how do these ministers reach such a position? In Brazil, the choice is made by the President of the Republic, who nominates the name of a jurist with outstanding reputation, someone between 35 and 70 years old, recognized for honesty, wisdom, and profound knowledge of the law. However, this nomination only becomes official after approval by the Federal Senate. Once confirmed, the minister can serve until the age of 75, when mandatory retirement occurs, unless he chooses to step down earlier by resignation. Another interesting fact is that in a nation of more than 200 million people, only 11 individuals hold this immense responsibility. For this reason, the STF only judges extremely relevant cases, most often those related to the Constitution or issues involving national security. Now, if we turn to the Bible, we realize that the concept of a Supreme Court is not something new. In the book of Exodus, we read about Moses acting as judge over the people in the wilderness. He would spend the entire day listening to disputes and judging causes, until his father-in-law, Jethro, gave him wise advice. What you are doing is not good. You will wear yourself out, and the people will grow weary as well. Appoint leaders over smaller groups. Let them judge the simpler cases, and reserve only the hardest matters for yourself. From that moment, the first hierarchical structure of justice was born. Simple matters were judged by local leaders, while Moses remained responsible for the most complex ones, acting, in a way, as the very first example of a biblical Supreme Court. Over time, this structure developed further and eventually culminated in the Great Sanhedrin of Jerusalem. Composed of 71 wise men, these judges were not chosen by politicians or kings, but recognized by the community for their moral, intellectual, and spiritual qualities. To join the Sanhedrin, one had to be married, have children, demonstrate life experience, complete honesty, and profound knowledge of the biblical law. It was also desirable that a candidate had stable financial conditions, so as not to be easily swayed by bribery or corruption. Furthermore, members of the Sanhedrin were required to be multilingual, able to understand the languages of different peoples and listen directly to witnesses without always depending on translators. In addition, they mastered not only the scriptures, but also areas such as medicine, biology, history, and the customs of neighboring nations, enriching their ability to judge fairly. All 71 members participated in the trials, and unlike today, there was a clear concern that justice should not take too long. The Bible regards the unnecessary delay of a judgment as an act of injustice itself, for it causes anguish and suffering to those awaiting a decision, leaving them uncertain about their future. Another fascinating detail is that the Sanhedrin met in Jerusalem, inside the Great Temple, the holiest place on earth for the Jewish people. The idea was simple yet profound. Justice had to remain directly connected to the fear of God and the awareness that the judges were not ruling only on behalf of men, but ultimately in the presence of the Creator himself. This gave an even greater weight of responsibility to each ruling. Perhaps the greatest difference between a human STF and the biblical model lies in the source of the laws. While any modern Supreme Court judges according to a constitution created by human legislators, the biblical Supreme Court judged based on the laws given directly by God. From a biblical perspective, this made injustice not merely a mistake, but a grave sin. Entire cities like Sodom were destroyed because of corruption and injustice. and kings such as Ahab and Jezebel were punished for their unfair and wicked rulings. Therefore, when comparing both models, we see something striking. Both the Brazilian STF and the biblical Sanhedrin were designed to resolve the most difficult and delicate cases. Yet while the modern court relies on human laws that are changeable and often influenced by politics, the biblical court rested on divine principles, regarded as eternal and unchangeable. And so, the reflection remains. Human justice, no matter how impartial it tries to be, will always be limited by the weaknesses and interests of mankind. But biblical justice, at least in its ideal form, presents itself as the very expression of the will of God, a justice that is perfect, righteous, and true for all times and all generations. If this content has blessed and inspired your life, just as the manna sustained the people in the desert, then leave your like and write amen in the comments below. May this message, just like the blessings of God multiplied among his people, also reach and touch many lives for the glory of the Lord.